Good day. I am Ann Mosikowski, President of the League of Women Voters of Central Delaware County. And on behalf of our league, I want to thank you for joining us for our hot topic, criminal justice in Delaware County. The mission of the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in citizenship, elections, and democracy, and works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. Today's program, suggested through the work of our Civic Education Committee, is intended to raise knowledge and awareness about the criminal justice system in our county, to highlight positive changes, to identify areas where we can advocate for improvement, and to build community and connections with our county leaders. Now I will introduce our moderator, Dr. Laura McLaughlin, a member of our league and a member of our Civic Education Committee. Laura is a professor at Neumann University in the School of Education and Human Services. Dr. McLaughlin will now introduce our panel of presenters and review the program format. Laura.
Thank you, Ann. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday afternoon to talk about our hot topic. I want to again reiterate the purpose of the hot topic is to highlight what's going on in Delaware County related to criminal justice, find areas where the league can advocate and become involved, and also provide an opportunity to create community and connections with our county leaders on these topics. So we're delighted to have with us an amazing panel of county leaders. I'm going to give a brief introduction for all four of them, and then ask each of the panelists to elaborate after I do the four introductions and add anything they would like to share related to their roles and our hot topic. So it's almost like an elevator speech, you know, at that point. So about 3 to 5 minutes. After that, we have a series of questions submitted by those of you that registered ahead of time, and I will try to get through as many as we possibly can. I want to thank Ann Mosikowski for categorizing the questions ahead of time, and the chair of our committee, Ralph Graves, for organizing this event. Some of the questions will be specific to certain panelists, and others will be open to any of the panelists. If I direct a question that should go to someone else, if you can all, the four of you can help me out, that would be great. Please feel free to add any additional questions into the chat, and Kathy Youngman will be helping me by monitoring those questions. And if we have time to fit them in during this session, we will. So we're going to do the best we can. And now I'm going to give you some of the bios. So we have with us today Delaware County Councilman Kevin Madden, who began his service in 2018. Kevin was born and raised in Media and is a third-generation Delaware County resident. Kevin serves as the chairman of the Delaware County Jail Oversight Board, serves on the board of the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, on the board of the Delaware County Historical Society, and is on the board for the Media Theater for Performing Arts. Next, we have Delaware County District Attorney Jack Stlzheimer. Jack is the son of a union bus driver and a Ukrainian refugee who has lived his American dream here in Delco. Inspired by his parents' struggles, Jack has dedicated his life to public service. He has served as a state and federal prosecutor, as Pennsylvania's Safe Schools advocate, and as deputy state treasurer prior to his election in 2019 as the 33rd District Attorney of Delaware County. Jack lives in Havertown with his wife, Judy, and their 2 children. Our next panelist is Jean-Pierre Brice, JP, a resident of Chester, PA, owns and operates an internet radio station, cmpradio.net, located in Upland, PA. He also works for CPSN Chester Partnership for Safe Neighborhoods as a resource manager. In 2008, in 2008, JP was released from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institute, Dallas. after a 1.5 to 3 year sentence with a new mindset, or so he thought. He had kicked a long-standing drug problem. He was done selling cocaine, and he was ready to be a father and a husband. Nothing went his way, and everyone that had promised him things when he came home were either long gone or just not in a position to help him. He worked jobs to make ends meet, sometimes 2 jobs. By 2015, he was about to divorce his wife, and his life was taking a crazy course. In 2016, he went to therapy with his now ex-wife to see if he could fix what was broken. What he discovered was that while he wanted something different for his life, mentally, he was still a child that had no purpose. After a few meetings on his own with his therapist, he learned that his purpose was to bring his city a radio station. CMP, or cultivating mature positivity through constantly making progress. His dream of having a real radio station in the city of Chester is still a vision that he is willing to walk as a small business leader and regular show host as Uncle P. So many people do what they need to do to survive, but not many people do what they need to do to live. And that's a quote from JP. Therapy unlocked that door for Jean-Pierre. As a resource manager, he now pushes therapy to everyone he meets. Jean-Pierre stated, "Therapy saved my life and allowed me the ability to dream and follow it no matter what." Last but not least, we have attorney Michael Resnick, who is the liaison for community justice and rehabilitation with Delaware County, and I believe new to the job. However, Michael has spent 30 years working in law enforcement, criminal justice, and corrections. During his career, he has worked to improve system efficiency and outcomes. He began his career as a trial attorney in the City of Philadelphia Solicitor's Office. In that role, he primarily litigated Section 1983 civil rights cases in federal court. Having become well-versed in prison policy and operations, Mr. Resnick has served in multiple roles, including Chief of Staff and Director of Legal Affairs for the Philadelphia Prison System, member of the Criminal Justice Advisory Board, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, then ultimately Director of Public Safety, and then served as Acting Commissioner of the Philadelphia Prison System and as Commissioner of the Baltimore City Jails. Mr. Resnick has served as an adjunct professor at Drexel University teaching law, criminal justice, and corrections. He has also served as a guest lecturer at Johns Hopkins University and the University of Maryland School of Law. So thank you everyone for those awesome bios, and we're excited to have you with us. Now I'm going to ask each panelist to tell us a little more about their role related to criminal justice in Delaware County before we get into the specific questions. And I'm going to go in order of how I did the bios. So we can start with Kevin, if that's okay.
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Laura. And thank you all for having this event, and for the League of Women Voters for hosting it. As Laura said, I am in my 5th year of being on county council. And really, when I first was running 5 years ago, and throughout my time on council, despite the fact that I didn't really have any background with the criminal justice system, what I kept coming back to was that all roads seem to lead to it. And what I mean by that is, at a time when we have record levels of opioids overdoses occurring in this country, and we have a crisis in mental health, and we have, so many of the sort of societal ills that ought to be handled by professionals in the form of treatment, people are ending up in jail. And so, what I saw is, on a micro level, as it relates to Delaware County, we had the only for-profit prison in the state of Pennsylvania. And on a macro level, there were lots and lots of people around the country on both sides of the aisle who were having conversations like this one. And we're seeing that the model of literally centuries, going back to puritanical times, this model of locking up the bad people and separating them from us good people was no longer working, and that it was overly simplistic, and it failed to recognize the realities of us as human beings, which is that we all make mistakes. We all fall into challenges in our life's path that may get us entangled in the criminal justice system. And the way, if we're really thinking intelligently about this, and we're thinking long-term, locking people away without giving them the necessary support that they need to turn their lives around is shooting ourselves in the foot. It's creating a system of people continuously getting entangled in it and continuing to be both challenges to public safety, drains on our society. And, because the reality is that we can't just sort of say we are in this for ourselves. We are in this together, as the pandemic very much showed. And when we have pieces of our society are struggling, we have to support them because we are all in this together. So my soapbox comments about why, despite an absence of criminal justice really being in my background, as a member of county council, as a candidate for county council 5 years ago, I kept coming back to wanting to play a role, a leading role in bringing Delaware County forward so that we were no longer a laggard, but could really be a thought leader in how we approach criminal justice. So in my capacity on county council, I've served as the liaison to the president judge, to the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, and the various other branches of the criminal justice system in Delaware County. And I've also served as the chair of the Jail Oversight Board since it was formed 2 years ago in the dissolving of the old prison board. And in the past year since it was formed, I have chaired the Juvenile Detention Board of Managers. So I will stop there, but that's me, and that's why I'm on here.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to go to Jack.
Great.
No, it's not yet, Jack.
Okay, well, thank you and good afternoon, everyone. I want to first begin by giving a shout out to my good friend JP for sharing his powerful story. JP, you never cease to amaze me, and being able to be so honest about your struggles, I think, informs people so much of what we see in the criminal justice system. It's people who need a little bit of help, as Kevin suggests, and oftentimes that's mental health services, which is, I think, something we're going to probably be talking a lot about today. So as district attorney, my job is I'm the chief law enforcement officer. And what that means is I have a staff of about 40 detectives and 50 prosecutors whose job it is to make sure that we are prosecuting people in the courts for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for criminal acts that they've committed. We work with all the police departments, or about 44 different law enforcement police departments in Delaware County to make that happen. We also believe that our mission is to make sure that we work and collaborate with everybody in the criminal justice system to make sure that we're giving people the best criminal justice system we possibly can have, both for the taxpayer's perspective and also for people who are in the system. I think, as Kevin so eloquently said, if we're punishing people for their bad acts, but we're not giving them the tools to not reoffend, we're really just shooting ourselves in the foot, I think you said, Kevin, and you're exactly right. And that's what's been missing for too long in criminal justice nationally. I just want to give a shout out. In 2006, the Department of Justice, where I used to work, began what's called the Criminal Reinvestment Initiative, partnered with the Pew Foundation, trying to convince policymakers that we need to rely less on incarceration and be able then to use those savings and tax dollars to put more into services. They found, for example, that I think 40% of the people who were in our county jails across the country were suffering from some level of mental illness, depression from being arrested, but also people with serious mental crises. I think Michael knows a lot about this more than I do. But that became a driving initiative that we're trying to do here in Pennsylvania. Attorney General Shapiro, when he was a state rep and as Attorney General, has been forward thinking on this as well. And we're trying to work together here. Kevin has been providing the leadership from County Council. Michael Resnick is now on board to make sure that all the actors can try to work the courts, the public defender, the private defense bar, police chiefs, myself, that we're all working towards a common goal, which is to make sure that we are increasing public safety by making sure that people are held accountable for their crimes, but also are given the chance to become productive members of our society, like my great friend JP, who is leading the fight against gun violence in Chester, is doing right now. So thank you very much. That was my elevator speech.
Thank you, Jack. Jean-Pierre?
First, I want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on, right? It's not too often we get an opportunity to talk about what's going on in the streets, right? I want to give a huge shout out to Jack, man. I didn't think I was skilled enough to do this job. And he told me, you know, just by continuing to be truthful and telling my story, that I could impact so many children, so many men, right, that don't know that their story is quite like mine. I am a community resource manager for Chester Partnership for Safe Neighborhoods. And that job has been very difficult, to say the least, right? I've been doing it for 2 years, right? No experience, but understanding what I needed. I had to look at myself when I was in the street and try to understand what exactly did I need when I was out here. And that's support, right? Being accountable to people, right, is instilling in them a sense of trust about myself and what the program is about. Never before has the DA's office offered anything like this, right? It's never been offered before. So a lot of people are skeptical, like, how do I become a part of this program? Why is this program being offered to me? And I tell them, you know, it's about you trusting me first, that I'm setting you up in a position to be successful, right? And to open up your eyes for hope. But you also have to be accountable for the things that you've done, right? So you talk to your therapist, you know, then you move forward to apologizing to your family. It's much like the Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, right? You have to first be accountable to yourself. And then you have to be accountable to the people that you might have harmed or hurt or lied to while you were out in the streets. And it's hard for a lot of young men, right, to understand that they have to do these things. So, you know, Chester Partnership for Safe Neighborhoods is in collaboration with the Community Coalition of Chester for therapy, right? Just bringing trauma-informed therapy to the forefront and saying, you know, a lot of people are committing crimes because their father committed crimes, because their cousin committed crimes. So they feel like that's just what they're supposed to do. They're not really criminals, right? They're just raised around a group, right? If your father was a lawyer and your mother was a lawyer, 9 times out of 10, you'll become a lawyer. You know what I mean? So if your father's a drug dealer and your mother's a drug dealer, 9 times out of 10, you'll become a drug dealer, right? So just understanding that and seeing that, you know, hope is within your reach. You just got to reach a little bit harder, right? You got to challenge yourself. So that's what Chester Partnership for Safe Neighborhoods stands for me, right? For my part of it, right? And just making sure that the community understands that.
Thank you, JP. Michael.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for this program, and thank you for letting me be a part of it. I am in my second week in this newly created position, and I think traditionally how things have worked in the criminal justice system, and you know, it's a big system made up of many different parts. Everybody has had their own sort of piece of it, and I think my role is envisioned to get those pieces collaborating, cooperating, talking, and working together. Because when we do that, I think we build better efficiencies, not only for the folks that make up the system, but the folks that find themselves in the system. I've been in law enforcement, corrections for going on 30 years. And the thing that I found to be true, which is I think what everybody on this panel has already said, is that you know, corrections is sort of the social service of last resort, right? People wind up incarcerated because the school system has failed them, the other social safety nets have failed them, they don't have job opportunities there, you know, maybe there's trauma and other issues in their family and their backgrounds, and those haven't been addressed and resolved, and they find themselves incarcerated. And then it's the job of sort of the jail or the prison to sort of fix this problem, right? And it just seemed to me, as I worked in these systems, that wouldn't it be a whole lot better if we provided people with these services that they needed prior to them ever coming here, to keep them from coming here? Operating jails and prisons is very, very expensive. And there are a lot of more economic alternatives out in communities that could better serve people. You know, even an arrest and you know, a brief incarceration for a week or two, maybe before you're able to make bail, is very disruptive to somebody's life. You know, when I was in Baltimore, one of the statistics that shocked me was that of the people that were arrested and came to my jail, 50% of them were gone within 2 weeks, which led to the question, why were they ever there in the first place? It's a huge disruption to people's lives. So if we could find ways to manage that population and help individuals prior to even coming into these facilities, all the better. Now, you know, we're still going to need jails and prisons because, you know, they're needed. But for a vast majority of people, there are a lot better alternatives. People with mental health issues, people who have substance use issues, you know, folks who've had, as JP mentioned, trauma in their life, and that's just their sort of experience. We can find other things to do.
Michael, thank you. And thank you for doing this on your second week of the job. So that was nice. Thank you all for everything that you're doing in Delaware County and for sharing, you know, your roles and what you're doing. And I can sense the passion and the care coming from all of you. I do want to say thank you to all of our participants who registered and sent these amazing questions. So we do have a lot of questions. As I said earlier, Anne put them in categories, and then I kind of moved them around so they're kind of chronological. So first starting with some general questions, then we're going to talk about avoiding incarceration, diversion programs, mental health services, juvenile justice issues, bail issues, sentencing, corrections, reentry, funding, and then what can the community and the league do? So that's a lot to fit in. We're going to do the best that we can, but just so you know that that's kind of what's coming. So the first part we'll start with are some of these general questions, which was, this one was, what trends in crime in Delaware County are evident in the data? And I thought that would go to Jack, if you think that.
Sure. So one thing you should know is that, as I mentioned earlier, there are 44 different police departments in Delaware County. So there's not a lot of real-time data. What happens in the United States is they report those things at the end of the year. So we don't have a lot of data points that we can look at every single day. But what I can tell you, we're seeing a great uptick in computer cyber crimes, including our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, where your child predator tips from the National Child Tip Line are up 60% this year. It's sort of overwhelming law enforcement throughout Pennsylvania. There's a ton more of these ghost guns that are now showing up. The amount of firearms that are out there is really disturbing. And they're getting into the hands of younger and younger people, which I think JP knows a lot about as well. The positive thing I'll say, and I want to lead with this, is that in the last year, because of the Chester partnership and the work that JP and the Chester Police Department and the Chester administration and the prosecutors and detectives in this office have been doing collaboratively, we reduced the homicide rate in the city of Chester by 38% last year. Numbers are still trending at that same lower level this year. People are feeling a lot better about the quality of life. There's still a lot more work to be done. We've got about 70 years of underinvestment in the city of Chester and all of our, frankly, third-class cities in Pennsylvania. So hopefully with a new governor, we're going to see some investment in the cities that will also begin to change that dynamic. But we're very hopeful about the work that we're doing in the city of Chester to reduce violence. And that's our number one priority, is to combat proactively and by prosecution people who commit serious violent acts in our county.
Thank you. Another general question was, how long are most paroles and probations in Delco? And this I had to go to either Jack or Michael, but Michael, I know this is only your second week, so I'm not sure.
There is no average. Every case is individual based upon the criminal history, the charges, the matrix that goes through the sentencing guidelines.
Okay.
Just so that everybody is aware of the distinction of parole and the distinction between a probation and a parole. A probation is your sentence. The judge will sentence you to serve a time of probation. That's usually supervised in the community. Your parole is you're incarcerated you're granted parole and released, and then you're supervised in that period of time after your incarceration.
Thank you. The last general question that came in was, how large is the jail population? How many are awaiting disposition and how many are serving sentences?
I can tell you, as I've been looking at it this past week, it's been hovering between 1,200 and 1,300. I don't have the breakdown for sentenced and pretrial, but generally in a county jail, the overwhelming number of people are there waiting adjudication, and a smaller proportion, usually 85%, 90% are pretrial, and the 10% are sentenced to a county sentence.
And just to put those numbers in some context,
Yep.
the jail is headlined for over 1,800 people. And looking back 4 years ago, it was at that level. We had north of 1,800 people in our county jail. Over the last 2 years, you have really seen a downward trend. Now, some of that, there is some noise in the data, right? When during the early pandemic, there was a particular concerted effort on the part with the court's assistance to, suspend certain programs that were, DUI folks who are there on the weekend, things of that sort that brought it down. But what we're seeing now, we're at a level that it's really starting to kind of stay. So there has been already tremendous progress in getting the numbers down. But what I'll also say is to look at it the other way. When you look on a per capita basis, you look at some of our neighboring counties, that number is still pretty high. So I think there's still significant work to be done in the collaboration that we've spoken of with Parole and Probation and the District Attorney's Office and the courts to really ensure that people who get entangled in the criminal justice system, that we find ways to address whether or not they need to be at the jail in advance of them going there, instead of going there and spending 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, while the criminal justice system figures out whether they actually need to be there in the first place.
Well, and to that point, Kevin, as you know, that's the next step of what we're all trying to do collaboratively together, which is a central arraignment system that will be real and functioning. The County Council has generously given my office and the Public Defender's Office staff to be now at the beginning end of the process. And we're hopefully days, if not weeks away from getting this up and running full time down the street here in media. But what we will be able to do, excuse me, is in real time have a public defender and an assistant district attorney making decisions as people are coming into the jail about whether or not those people can be diverted into our diversionary programs, whether they can be released on a lower bail if it's agreed to by the court, and making some of those kind of adjustments at the very beginning part of the process. If somebody, as you suggest, isn't there, and then Michael, I think, expertly pointed out, isn't there for 2 weeks and then eventually released. We want to make sure that on the very front end of the system, we're trying to do that. And I think this is the best practice I've seen across the country. It's also a practice that is anticipatory of the bail changes the state Supreme Court will be ordering, I think, later this year. And I think we're going to be, Kevin, as you suggested earlier, we're a thought leader. We're going to be ahead of the curve with our central arraignment system. And again, I want to thank you and County Council for giving us the extra resources to do that. I also want people to know that in the beginning of the pandemic, the numbers at the jail were, I think, as Kevin suggested, appropriately artificially low, especially when people were locked in their homes. Crime rate dropped dramatically, right? Because nobody was out and about. People could tell. We also suspended some sentences for people who are low-level offenders, and those sentences are now being put back. So the numbers are where they are. They're at least 20% lower than they have been historically. It's 1883 was the capacity of the jail, and it was always, Kevin, if I'm not mistaken, for I think since it was open in 1995 or 96, it was almost always at that high level capacity. So keeping it down to an appropriate level, I think what that means is we're doing our job as the defense bar and as a prosecutor and trying to sort through those cases at the earliest stage possible and say who really needs to be in jail and who would be safe to release out on the street or put into a diversionary program right away.
So then, thank you, Jack. The next section is about avoiding incarceration, and some of this might have already been addressed with the conversation that we just had, but what new thinking, this is to Kevin, what new thinking is present within County Council toward the operation of the prison or practices around incarceration?
Yeah, so we've spent a good chunk of the last 10 minutes talking about the immediate term stuff, right? It's the making the system more efficient, having central arraignment where people are, their cases are processed more quickly and outside of George W. Hill. And that makes major impact. But what this question sort of points to is the stuff that will no doubt have an impact on our jail population, but more in the sense of reducing recidivism. That takes some time, right? And so to answer the question, first of all, we ceased to have a jail that was run by a for-profit operator. We're providing the best quality treatment for people dealing with mental health issues or drug addiction issues. Isn't a cost center, right? When you have a for-profit model, those are things that hit your bottom line. They have every incentive, to be very, blunt about it, to keep a jail full. So when you remove that model and instead you place a system where those investments into people's mental health, into their substance abuse issues, into, their dealing with aggression and in ways that are more productive. Those are all things that are obvious investments to make, right? Because as we're reducing the jail, and as Mr. Resnick pointed to, it's really expensive to incarcerate someone. As you're reducing the population, dollars are fungible. You can now take that money and invest it into supporting people, which is what we're doing. We have a warden who's been on the job for 4 months or so, less than that. She came in just before we made the transition in early April. She comes from a lifetime that was both in and outside of corrections on the side of treatment. She's got a master's degree in psychology. She is someone who comes from the side of supporting people. And I think people can play lip service to it. We want to make sure we hired someone whose career is on that side of things. She no doubt realizes the importance of the public safety side of running a jail. And she has a deputy who's on the sort of the security side, but a big part of it is really having leadership who leans into the idea of giving people the support that they need while they are at jail.
Thank you, Kevin. This one is for Jean-Pierre. What messages do you share through CPSN, Chester Partnership for Safe Neighborhoods, with the community to help keep them out of prison?
Well, first of all, I share a message of accountability, right? I'm accountable to them, so I expect accountability back. Also, a message of trust, right? They have to trust me. They have to believe that what I'm saying to them is true, right? I deal with from 17 to 24-year-olds, right, in the beginning for different programs. So you have to be of that age to be able to get into the program with EDSI or Pathstone. But the trouble that I'm finding is from 25 to 42, there are no programs for these people, right? And they have been ingrained in committing crime, right? And that's how they survive, right? So for me to stop committing crimes, I had to sacrifice. I had to suffer a long time, right? With not having things the way I wanted them. So, that message of hope and trust and accountability is bigger for them than it is for the younger kids, because I have to be accountable for them. They have to be able to call me 12 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning. Yo, man, I need a couple of hours, man. I can't do this. And I have to show up, drop a couple of hours on them and talk to them, or maybe take them to Wawa, get something to eat, right? Because they're sacrificing now, right? They're changing their lives. A lot of people don't trust the DA's office. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not dealing with the DA, but I'll deal with you, but I don't want my name nowhere. I don't want you giving them my name at all, right? And so I have to give them that trust to understand that I'm not giving that information back to Jack. And they don't want that information from me, right? They don't ask for that information from me. But when I have someone that gets in trouble, I have a young man that just got arrested the other day, right? He's a football player. He plays football. He got arrested with a gun. I had to ask him, why are you carrying this gun? He said, I lost 2 of my friends to the streets. They both got gunned down in the street. How else am I supposed to walk to the store? Like, how else am I supposed to continue to live life without this gun? So, he had a $25,000 bail, right? $2,500, 10%. But where does a 17-year-old get $2,500 from? So, I All right, so I had to get him on his mission, right? I gave him $10. I told him to go over to the Dollar Tree, get a cardboard, right? I need you to put a vision board together, right? These are the things that were never instilled in our children before, to see where you want to go, right? To put your blinders on and to just look forward. All the noise on the side, it doesn't matter. He did that. He just called me a couple seconds ago, right? And I had to deny his call. But I'm always on shift. I'm always working 24 hours a day, so that they understand that I'm here, and I give them hope every time they talk to me. Man, I'm going through the same thing, right? I had a brother call me Saturday, and we talked on the phone for 2 hours. He was telling me about his girlfriend and everything that he's trying to do. I said, I'm going through the same thing, bro, right? But we can sit here and we can talk, and we can lean up against each other and be like, wow, this is real. So a message of hope, a message of trust, and definitely a message of accountability is the message that I'm giving through CPS.
It's a great message. And I see Ann had put through a link to CMP radio as you were talking to. So thanks, Ann, for doing that in the chat. The next section of questions is about diversion programs. So I'm going to just direct those, I think, to Jack at this point. What is Delco doing? What kind of programs are available through your office? Anything else we need to know?
Sure. Yeah, we're actually doing a lot, and it was one of the priorities when I got elected district attorney. We hired a deputy district attorney for the first time and put them in charge of diversionary programs. So Selena Jones is here, and this is all she does every single day, is make sure our diversionary programs are up and running. The lead one is called ARD, Accelerated Rehabilitation. Every district attorney does this in Pennsylvania. Most people are familiar with it, like for first-time DUI offenders, and you can get the charges eventually dismissed if you go through community service and if you pay fines and things like that. First thing we did when we found our ARD program here was that they were asking for proof of citizenship. We got rid of that. We also changed dramatically the way you can do community service. It used to be almost like chain gangs here. You had to do blocks of 8 hours and be told to go out on the highway with a yellow jacket and take litter off. We have allowed people to do community service in a variety of different forms for chunks of time, whether they want to help their church or they want to help a community group. We're also allowing people, if they have literacy issues and they want to take a literacy program, we're counting that as community service. To Kevin's point earlier about trying to help people rehabilitate themselves and find something positive, and JP's experience something positive out of this crisis you put yourself in. So ARD is one thing. We have a veterans court, which we're revamping to try to get the word out so that veterans know it's available for them. We have a treatment court, a drug treatment court. We're actually at 2 o'clock this afternoon going to be celebrating the graduation of a new group of people who have gone through drug treatment court. And I hope, and I think Kevin and Michael will join me on this, with the opioid monies that are going to be coming into the county. Both county council and my office under me sued a bunch of opioid distributors. And because of Attorney General Shapiro's great work getting a settlement, we're going to see a block of money coming to Delaware County, which we can use on things like increased drug treatment, either at the county facility, correction facility, or hopefully in our drug treatment court. We also started our own diversionary program. We call it DCMD, not the most exciting name, but it's a Delaware County Misdemeanor Diversionary Program. And what we're really doing is we're, again, trying to triage the cases at the beginning, working particularly with like small theft cases that don't rise to felonies, and if it's first-time offenders in particular, and try to get them out of the system as quickly as possible, letting them do a 8-hour community service, pay the whatever fees are required and restitution, and then move on. And we're always exploring sort of new ways to continue to do these things. And we just want to keep getting the word out about the programs we're running. We also partnered with Attorney General Shapiro with a program called LETI, Law Enforcement Treatment Initiative. And this is really a long-term program to try to encourage police officers to think differently about people who have substance abuse disorders when they encounter them in our streets. It gives them the freedom to take that person immediately into treatment if they're willing to do so. And we then will dismiss the charges. I think Kevin might want to talk a little bit about this, but the drug treatment court and LETI have been dramatically impacted by Crozier's, and it's not Crozier, it's the California, guys who own Crozier right now, have pulled out of our county a lot of these critical services that we need to run these programs. County Council has done unbelievable work trying to get replacements in place, both short-term and long-term. But it's impacted, as Kevin mentioned earlier, the tremendous increase in substance abuse problems that are happening all across our country. Well, now some of our leading providers of services are trying to pull out of Delaware County. We have a great local organization called MVP Recovery that's really stepping up and trying to help us fill that gap. But I don't know, Kevin, if you want to talk more about that and the great work Sandy Garrison and Human Services and U1 Council have done to get contracts in place.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years, huh? We've had a
Yeah.
lot thrown at us, whether it's a pandemic or an out-of-state organization that is ostensibly in the business of treating people, but has certainly not acted that way locally here. Yeah, since we've all seen the news of Prospect and their statements about withdrawing services that are critical, Sandy Garrison, who leads our Human Services, and her team in collaboration with the Solicitor's Office and the Controller's Office and everyone else who's needed to, have really worked around the clock. And I really mean that. I mean, we're getting emails at 2 a.m. on Saturdays as they have been backfilling the services that Prospect Crozier has threatened to leave. And we've been pretty successful in doing so. We approved on Wednesday night a pretty lengthy list of contracts of services that Crozier was providing to make sure that we're not entirely beholden to them. Now, I will tell you, conversations are ongoing with Prospect Crozier. We're making every effort through public pressure and private pressure to ensure that they don't. But it's as the district attorney alluded to, it's been a all hands on deck process for the last couple of months to make sure that we backfill.
And Kevin, we appreciate that. I mean, everybody who is in the substance abuse and recovery community gets what you guys are trying to do. And, hats off, really. And thank you for all the support in that space.
Okay, thank you. Jack and Kevin, you answered a lot of the diversion questions that were posed prior. So I'm going to jump down to mental health services. So what does DELCO do to prevent police misconduct, incorporate trained unarmed specialists to intervene in mental health or domestic crises, and to avoid the potential for harmful outcomes arising from minor infractions? And I put that to go to either Jack or Kevin. I wasn't sure.
Jack, I think that's probably more your.
Sure. Many of our police officers go through trauma-informed training, how to deal with people with mental health issues. But as every police chief in Delaware County knows, and as we told Congresswoman Scanlon recently when we were getting together to talk about the mobile crisis unit that County Council has given us the opportunity to put into place with federal funding secured by Congressman Scanlon, we need help. We need more tools. I mean, it is one of the if it's not number one, it's number 2 issues every police department in Delaware County has to deal with. There are too many people suffering with mental health issues, and there's essentially no place to take them oftentimes. And there's simply not enough providers in this space. I mean, we have a real crisis in this country of having enough providers to deal with the increasing levels of mental illness I think so many people are displaying. Chief Viola, my police chief in Haverford Township, who sits on our Criminal Justice Advisory Board, every month at our meetings, he's asking, what can we do? How can we get more resources? What can we do about mental health? So we're all aware of the problem. I think the mobile crisis team is one potential solution. Sandy Garrison, and amongst trying to stop the disaster that Crozier is trying to leave in Delaware County, had an RFP out to see if we can get providers to provide this service. And they will be the people who will work with police. They will be trained along with police officers, but they will respond to calls to go out on mental health crises as well. There are times when police officers have to serve 302 warrants to put somebody in a facility. Those can be very dangerous. But there's also times when police come into contact with people and it becomes evident to them through their training that the person needs mental health services. So just like they could have a substance abuse disorder, we want them given the opportunity to take them and put them into a substance abuse treatment center through LEDI. We want them to be able to do the same thing with the mobile crisis unit. And these would be the people who would come out, and they're the experts. They'll be the trained people to help them. And sometimes, as Chief Viola says, sometimes the officer in uniform is the right person to talk to them, and sometimes he's not. So we're in the process of getting that implemented. The funding just came down from the feds. Sandy is working overtime to get an RFP out. It's out on the street now. Government always takes longer than we would like it to, but it'll be up and running. And the point of the funding that Congressman Scanlon's got us, and Kevin, you might want to talk about this, is to get us a pilot project, because a year's worth of funding buys us the opportunity to find out how we can make this work. Because again, we have to bring all these different systems together, which is so much about what goes on, not just in the criminal justice system, but in general in county government. County governments do human services and they do the administration of justice. It's by and large 90% of what they do. And each of them are vast agencies or biospheres, really, with different agencies within them who all have a different piece of that puzzle. So getting them, that's why we have Resnick here, right? He's going to, on the criminal justice side, be the coordinator, the collaborator, the partner to try to get everybody working towards a common goal. So that's what we would love to do. I think we're hopefully, because of Congresswoman Scanlon's involvement in county council's ask through the police chiefs, because when we put this to the chiefs, the Congresswoman Scanlon was willing to go to Washington and ask for funding for us. What would we want? This was the number one thing the chiefs came up with. County council immediately agreed, and now we have the chance to have a mobile crisis team.
And just to put it in context for you, the percentage of people with mental health issues who are incarcerated in a county jail could be as high as 30% of the population. That's just, the numbers from my experience in both Philadelphia and Baltimore. I don't know the numbers here yet, but I can't imagine that they're markedly different. And of those folks that have a mental health diagnosis, they can be up to high as 18 to 20% who are seriously mentally ill at any time in a correctional facility. So it's a major problem for corrections. And as Jack just said, the resources in the community are sparse. So that's sort of the default where people with mental health issues wind up.
Exactly right.
Thank you. And another question was added this morning about how does childhood trauma impact mental health, addiction, and criminal justice involvement? And what is in place to heal this trauma in place of jail time? So anything really,
Yeah. So, my experience as a prosecutor, there are 5 characteristics of every violent offender. They are poverty, addiction, mental health, lack of educational attainment, or childhood trauma, usually by abuse. Everybody has one of those 5, if not multiple, factors present in their life. That doesn't excuse the crime that they have committed, especially a violent crime where the victim wants justice. And we as a community and as a Commonwealth have the duty to do that. But we also, to the original point Kevin Madden was making, if we're not addressing those underlying issues while we have them in our system, Michael's exactly right. They fall into the criminal justice system in part because either the other systems have failed or they failed to access them. But they've come to the criminal justice system and we're the bottom. And now we've got to help these people access those services that can get them better. JP, your personal experience in this is exactly, I think, speaks to what I just said.
Yes, thank you. JP, did you want to add?
Absolutely. Childhood traumas, the way we handle the traumas of Chester, like Jack has said earlier, Chester has been a long forgotten city, right? It's a third-class city, so there aren't a lot of resources for the city of Chester. I think during the pandemic, George Floyd, right, seeing how that cop kneeled on his neck, right, and then before then, the epidemic of the opioid crisis, right, that happened, right, sparked different fuel for different people that we really needed everybody to care about, right? And now we're worried about trauma, like what happened to this child to make him feel as though this is what he has to do, right? This is for nonviolent offenders. That's how I'm looking at people. For the violent offenders, I say the same thing. We need to find out, why did you do what you did? So I think everything that Jack and the DA's office is doing, everything that Delaware County Council is doing to put trauma first is highly important in our community.
Thank you, JP. Which brings me to the next category, which is juvenile justice issues. So some of the questions that came in related to that are what efforts are being made to reduce juvenile detention? Is there a youth aid panel for first offenders? And then the last one was how can we build support for a different sort of approach to juvenile detention in Delco?
Sure. So, and I'll let Kevin speak too, but, statewide, both in Delaware County and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the number of kids who are held in detention has dropped dramatically over the last 10 to 12 years by over 70%. I'm actually going to go testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee on some juvenile justice reform bills on Monday. So I've been preparing testimony. So the number of admissions into juvenile detention facility have dropped dramatically across the Commonwealth and here in Delaware County. But there are still children who need to be held in detention. And what people need to understand is it's not a juvenile prison. And what it is a secure facility where they're given the care to sometimes get away from the trauma that's been affecting them and allow them to commit a delinquent act or acts. Sometimes the parent needs the child to be removed so they can be safe, but they're really in there because they're presenting a harm either to themselves or to another person. And the whole point of the juvenile justice system is those kids are just going to be given treatment at some point anyway. So when they're in our detention facility, and Michael, one of his jobs and one of Kevin's jobs is they're going to be giving us, I think, a state-of-the-art juvenile detention portfolio here in Delaware County. We want to be, as Kevin said, a thought leader in Delaware County. We want to take the lemons that we've been handed and turn them into lemonade. I think Kevin would agree with that, by thinking outside the box, thinking we've got every program we possibly can have. And I'll let Michael and Kevin speak, but I just wanted to address the one thing, Laura, about youth aid panels, because this is a great tool. Youth aid panels, District Attorney Meehan started them back here when he was district attorney in the 1990s. And they were usually run out of the district attorney's office. I served on a youth aid panel when I was in the U.S. Attorney's office in Philadelphia. It's really great. What it is that we're diverting cases, juvenile cases, away from the juvenile system. They're small level cases, first time offenders, bring them before some people in the community who get to hold them accountable, let them do some community service right there in the community. And most of those kids you never see again in the system. They learn and they realize what they've done and they don't do it again. During the pandemic, obviously that all got disrupted from the way it's been done here in Delaware County. We're trying to reinvigorate that. My first assistant, Tanner Rouse, has been working with Michael. I think you guys have already had a couple conversations about this, but we want to take a much more active role than we have previously here over the last 10 or 15 years. For some reason, it got away from the DA's office, but we want to be directly involved. Some communities do a great job with this, Laura, and what we really want, I would love to make a pitch to the League of Women Voters. If you can help us identify people or get people who want to be youth aid panelists, because it really, it's a small, Michael, you've probably had experience with youth aid panels as well, I think. It's really invigorating. So if you and Kevin want to speak here, but just having done it myself, it's really one of the best things you can do to serve your community. When you've got local kids from your community who come before you and you get a chance to hold them accountable, give them a little bit of guidance, make sure that they're doing something to help their community, and then knowing that they're going to be upstanding citizens, it's a great feeling. So please help us recruit people. And now I'll turn it over to Michael and Kevin about the rest of the juvenile justice stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jack.
I'll let the councilman go first.
All right. Well, look, I will say, as the district attorney alluded to, detention is truly the intervention of last resort. And if you look historically, it's been way overused. And that, as Jack alluded to, it has dropped significantly. I mean, the numbers of juveniles detained now versus 5 or 6 years ago, it's down like 80%. Now, I will say there's one little wrinkle in there, which is at the beginning of this year, the case of direct file. So juveniles who have been accused of something that's more severe in nature and violent in nature, and we're talking really like homicide level. They were previously going directly to and Jack, you can get me perfectly on the facts here, but roughly speaking, these more higher, violent crimes, they were going to George W. Hill. They were going to a county jail and treated as adults. And under the new laws starting this calendar year, they're going to juvenile detention. So you'd see sort of an increase in numbers versus last year, but that's really the main driver. But it's, like I said, it's sort of the intervention of last resort. We do need to do far more than there has been historically about providing an array of services that are diversionary in nature. And that's a big part of why Mr. Resnick we brought in, is to make sure that we have that liaison and collaboration happening between human services, probation and parole, and juvenile detention. And one last thing I'll say is, prior to last March, juvenile detention was overseen by essentially accident of the way things have always been by the courts. And that's not the way state law was really intended to have it. And so it's only since last March that directly with more collaboration between county council and other stakeholders, we have this new juvenile detention board of managers that's taken a direct role in it.
Thank you, Kevin.
And just to follow up on what both Jack and Kevin said, we are in the county looking to enhance the services provided to at-risk and justice-involved youth. So we're preparing a detailed RFP, a request for proposal, to have somebody come in to help us take a deep data dive, take a look at, the demographics of the kids who are involved, where they come from, their backgrounds, what are the symptoms that are causing this? Why are they doing what they're doing? What does the research tell us is the best way to resolve these things? What programs really have good outcomes and work, and can they be fitted here into Delaware County? So that's in the works, and that's coming, and that'll give us, instead of guessing, and we think it's this, or it's always been like that. It'll take a look at the data and really inform our decisions.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. So I did want to be cognizant of the time, and I don't want to keep everyone too long. So I wanted to talk about, let me see, I'm skipping some questions to get to, this one. What kinds of community support would most help to reduce recidivism? And that goes to Jean-Pierre.
Opportunities. Opportunities and caring, right? We have a high number of people that come home from jail and just go right back to doing what they were doing before. Jobs, a place to live, programs that are helping individuals realize who they truly are, right? We put this facade on when we're in the street of a drug dealer or a shooter, when we're really not that, right? We're nice, we're intelligent. We don't quite know how intelligent we are, right? And I think opportunities, far outweigh, being jailed, right? You jail somebody for 5 to 10 years. If they're not really in there to get help, they're in there just to survive, right? And then there's no help being given. There's no teachers there, right? They have jail programs where they're teaching people, but when they come home from jail, they're like, all right, I got to get back to it. I got to make money. I have to survive. So I think 6 months before their release, and I spoke with Jonathan Abdul-Rahim King, because he's the king of reentry, right? About a reentry program located here in Delaware County. Now I looked up one the other night and was looking for one. I haven't seen any. Now, if anyone knows of any, definitely let me know, right? But I don't see any that are located in Delaware County. So that's a big problem, right? If we have people that are not helping other people gain these opportunities, then we have a gap there, and people keep falling into the gap. So I always tell people, I climbed out of the hole of going to prison. Once I went upstate, that was it for me. I didn't want to go back again. There was nothing upstate that I wanted to be involved in. So when I came home, I made sure I changed my life. I had to change my thinking. I had to change the way I was going about doing things. So opportunity has to be there. And, you have to show people, and an opportunity comes on both ends, right? The person is giving you this, and then you have to show them that you're worthy of more, so they can give more, right? They can give more to other people. So I think just opportunity, a place to live, a job, and programs that allow them to dream is key.
Laura, can I just piggyback for 1 second? Last year, everything JP said is exactly true, of course. I just wanted you to know that we got a grant for PCCD to start a reentry coalition, which is being great work done by our public defender's office. Lee Aubrey is doing a fantastic job of gathering everybody who's doing reentry work at some level in Delaware County, bringing them around a table, and then hopefully getting that information out to people. So we eventually hope to have it as a reentry coalition. Appropriately, the public defender's office is taking the lead in getting that formed, and I'm just thankful for everything that they've done.
And that was the next question too, which was what kind of programs are available? So what you're saying is that that's something that's in the works.
It's in the works, and I will say that County Council has been so generous in appropriating funds both for our office and for the public defenders, so that we've got good, capable people able to do this work and to think outside the box and do things like Lee is doing with the Reentry Coalition. So, you know, a lot of these things are works in progress. We've only been doing this together as this group for a couple of years now, and there was a pandemic or so in the middle of it. But we struggled through, just like Kevin deprivatized a jail during a pandemic instead of a health department. We're going to continue to do the things we're doing on the criminal justice side to make it the best possible system. I think, as Kevin said, as a thought leader in Pennsylvania.
And just one more quick thing to add on to that. It really is a matter of the handoff. So under our new warden, we recently hired a new person who's a deputy specifically around reentry to make sure that they are liaisoning with the appropriate treatment providers and everyone else associated with reentry, that's starting before they even leave.
Thank you, Kevin. Michael, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to follow up real quickly on what Jack said, I had conversations with Lee and Chris, both at the public defender's office, and you know, they've informed me there are certain programs that they're considering bringing to the county. I don't want to get into which programs they are yet. They haven't been presented before council, but they're very successful programs. They're well regarded, well respected. They have great track records. We've had them in Philadelphia for a number of years with the partnership with the district attorney's office up there, the Defenders Association, the courts, the prison. They have great results. So they'll be coming to Delaware County very soon.
And the community will know about it?
Of course.
Great.
It just hasn't gone to council yet, so I don't want to.
Got it. Understood.
Talk about it.
Thank you. And then the next question was about funding, and like, you know, the first thing was, what is the possibility of getting better funding for public defenders? Is there any way that funds could come from the state? What should we be doing to encourage more funding?
I'll just start by saying there has been a significant increase in funding. I mean, public defenders' salaries are up from a starting salary, something in the range of 40% from what we inherited. So we are ensuring that there's, you know, as close to sort of parity as we can on both sides of the, you know, the adversarial system that we're in. But to your point, Pennsylvania is an outlier. Nearly every other state in the country, they're providing state funding to pay for public defense as there is support for prosecutorial side. That's not the case in Pennsylvania. So, you know, if I were waving a magic wand and I had state authority, it's something I would really lean into, because, you know, it is an incredibly short-sighted way of thinking about funding. And I do hope that our state legislature and governor can find a way to make that happen. But it's, you know, it's certainly an area that we should be putting more into.
Thank you, Kevin. And I wanted to make sure I got to these two questions, especially because they have to do with what can the league do and the community do to support all of this. So the first question can be to any of you: what role do you see for the League of Women Voters to bring about reform in the criminal justice system?
I would just say, first of all, you're starting to exactly what you can do right now by having these intelligent discussions amongst people who are engaged in this work every day. Criminal justice reform is happening. It's been happening. It will continue to happen. It's a process, and it's something, I think Michael will back me up on this. This is something that we need to continuously think about. It's not something, you don't just build a machine and say, okay, we're going to run this for the next 40 years this way. People in the system need to continuously be asking questions. This is the problem in government. Michael and I, he's shaking his head because we're both old guys who've been in government for a long time. and people silo off and they just get used to the culture of the place that they work in and they don't ask these questions. How can we do it better? How can we serve the taxpayer better? Now, we got to keep doing that. I think people like Kevin Madden and me, people like Michael Resnick, people like JP, all of us want to continue to do that. We want to always be thinking, what can we do better every single day in our jobs?
Yeah,
You agree, Michael?
Yeah, I agree with Jack. I think these types of programs where, people, I taught college for 10 years at Drexel University. I taught classes in corrections and criminal justice, and it astounded me the number of students that were undergraduates in a university that had no idea how government works, why government works the way it works, what the constitutional provisions are, why things are the way they are. I don't know how you just happily, ignorantly go through life. It just amazed me. So clearly, we're not doing a very good job teaching people civics. So I think a basic civics education as to why things are the way they are. And I think that would, just as an editorial, go a long way to solve some of the problems we're seeing in politics today. But if people knew why the government works the way it works and what their rights are under the Constitution and the laws, I think we would see a lot more active participation. So I think programs like this and more education are key. And like Jack said, you don't just build a system and let it go for 40 years. You have to constantly be thinking, how can we do this better? And we've always done it this way is really not a good answer.
Not the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo a lot of that. I mean, I think having conversations like we're having today is so crucial, because criminal justice tends to be one of those areas that really lends itself to extreme views, where you're either tough on crime or you're for restorative justice, and there's no black and white. And that's not the reality of what we face. There is an important place for true outrage at wrong. I'm not taking that away. People who are real advocates for change continue to be outraged by where you see something that's unjust. But at the same time, we need to balance that with, thoughtful conversations around where people who may seem things in extreme ways, there's a whole lot more overlap that I think we can really agree on when we talk about the actual facts. So that's why, forums like this are so important.
Thank you, Kevin. And I have to say too, about teaching children and civic engagement, as a teacher of teachers, I know that is critically important and, something that we need to do better for sure. So I think starting our kids out young, starting out children very young, talking about these issues is really important. So how can the League of Women Voters be most effective in supporting positive change in the criminal justice system for folks you have supported in Delco? And that goes to Jean-Pierre.
You have to care. You have to care enough to want to be there. You have to use empathy a little bit, right? And there's nothing wrong with you living in Haverford and having a mother and a father and experiencing a nice childhood. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But you have to understand that everyone doesn't grow up the same way you grow up, right? And everyone doesn't have the same things that you have had, right? So you have to come to Chester and be involved, right? And a lot of people are they might be scared of that, but adopt a child, right? That's what the big brother, big sister program, right? There are so many instances where you can help another child. And I want to tell y'all, continue advocating the way y'all are moving, right? The League of Women Voters, I'm extremely proud to be a supporter, however you guys need me to be a supporter, right? And having these conversations, because if you don't have a conversation, you don't know what's wrong, right? And you don't know what's wrong, you can't fix anything, right? You can hear a squeaky wheel forever, and which wheel is it? Until you really listen, right? So I think everything that you guys are doing, I thank you for that, right? Keep caring, showing empathy, and giving yourself and making yourself valuable to someone that doesn't even know that they are valuable is important.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. So yeah, I think that I didn't get to every single question, but I think I got to most of the questions. And I'm just really appreciative of all of your time coming on here and sharing what's happening in Delaware County, focusing on the positive, letting us know what the league can do and, how we can help. And we want to continue to have these kind of conversations. So thank you all for doing this. Does anybody have anything else to say before we begin to wrap this up?
Just thank you, Laura, for the work you put in to make this thing happen today. You personally, we really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks, Jack. So I'm going to bring it to Anne. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, and you're muted.
Yeah, I am.
There you
Thank
go.
you. Okay. Always an issue, right? So thank you. Thank you all for sharing your expertise. This is such an important topic. Our Civic Education Committee has done a lot of work in bringing this to be a reality. So we want to thank everybody involved in this. As an event follow-up, we will share with everybody that registered. So those that even weren't on here today, but we had close to 60 some people register. So we will share the recording link out with everybody, resources that have been put in the chat. If there's additional resource links that people that are on this want to share, please put them in the chat now and we will share them out. We try to, as we've done in the past, as presenters were presenting, if there was a point, we try to go out and find a link on that topic. So it's always helpful. I would also like to take a moment to announce that there's a newly formed League of Women Voters Delaware County Criminal Justice Committee that's going to be countywide. And right now they're tasked with conducting a league study of various aspects of the criminal justice system within Delaware County and specifically dealing with the county prison. So we thank you for all your work. And again, if there's ways that you can help this committee and give information, or when the committee reaches out for information, we hope you will support the work of the committee. To finish our 2021-2022 program year, and we've been very active this year, we invite our league members to our 2022 annual meeting. It's scheduled currently as an in-person event for Saturday, June 4th. It's going to begin at 10 a.m. It's at the Spring Haven Club in Wallingford. And we're going to also be honoring at that time a reporter, Kathleen Carey, for her work, her fact-based work in journalism. So we're going to have a conversation dealing with facts. So it was good to hear the reaction to the panelists talking about our work. Thank you for that. And we want to thank all again for participating in this event.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.